Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball
with Air Sport. Watch every Munster and Leinster game only on the Air Sport pack. Visit airsport.ie.
So much to discuss. Wins for Leinster and Munster at the weekend, and Champions Cup is here. So we're rolling out the big guns. Eddie O'Sullivan is on the line, and Keith Wood, you're there.
How are you?
Good. It's all kicking off. We've had a month of having to talk about the Pro 14 and the various issues with player welfare and who plays and who doesn't play, and now we're into the good stuff, I think.
Yeah, it's amazing really that it seems as if you can just write off 1 month and then it kind of kicks into action. I thought it was a cracking weekend of rugby on both games. I thought there was a little bit of controversy with the referees and complaints about the referees in both matches. But I thought they were fantastic. Great spectacle, really good advertisement for the Pro 14. And I think it also kind of showed that there is a high level of competition still involved in these derby matches, because they were brilliant to watch.
Eddie, we'll start with the Aviva. Sum it up for us then. Leinster 30, Munster 22.
I think Leinster were probably rode their luck a little bit with the way the calls went for them. But on the balance, they probably deserved to win it based on their defence more than anything. They were very clinical in the way they scored, but I think they had to hold out from huge pressure from Munster. Munster dominated territory, 65% possession, around the same. So they were under the pump, Leinster, and they just defended very well. And I suppose that it's always bad when there's a talking point is about the referee after a game, but there was a fair bit of talking point about that referee. But I suppose nobody could complain too much if Munster had the opportunity to beat Leinster in terms of the amount of possession and territory they had, and just couldn't get it done. And that's a reflection on how strong Leinster are, particularly on the defensive side of the ball this year. Maybe they were more brittle last year, but they seem to have got themselves well organised this year.
Keith, we'll get on to the referee in a second. What about the game itself?
I thought it was a great game, and I was looking at it hopeful for Munster to do well. There were two strong teams. I know Leinster rested more, but they've an incredible strength and depth in their squad. And in many respects, the ability to close out the game in the second half with the guys that came off the bench was part of the telling factor. I thought Munster seemed to leave some of their players on for longer because they had to, and so maybe some of the errors happened at the end. But in terms of quality, it was excellent. I know that Ross Byrne got man of the match, but for me, it was James Lowe all day long. I just thought he gave a masterclass in how to finish, in how to be involved in game moments. He scored 2, could have been a third, penalty try from it. I just thought it was a brilliant game of rugby, but I thought both sides played very well. And I go into it slightly worried for Munster because their form away from home has been dire. They played bloody well at the weekend. They could have been a bit more clinical. They were, I'm going to say, unlucky. I don't know that I disagree with the referee at all, but on other days it may not have gone in that fashion. But I think it was very, very close, and the margins have become a lot smaller. But I thought Leinster were absolutely phenomenal. I thought they played incredibly well.
Right, okay. On James Lowe, Eddie, then, if we're talking about a real difference maker, maybe along with some refereeing decisions, Keith mentioned the 2 tries, 53 metres over the course of the game, which is more than double anybody else on his team. He's now scored 14 tries in his 17 Leinster matches thus far, and he was even talking, when he arrived last year, he was on the back of 12 months straight of rugby, and frankly, he was saying to Luke Fitzgerald on his podcast last week that he was a bit done with rugby. You know, he was wrecked, frankly, and then had to kind of chuck up and finish out the season with Leinster. So his impact is fairly phenomenal. It looks like Jamison Gibson Park has rolled his ankle and therefore won't be on the bench at the weekend against Wasps, and so either Nick McCarthy or Hugh O'Sullivan will come in on the bench and Scott Fardy plays. So James Lowe, you would think, will be involved against Wasps. Is he now playing so well that one of Fardy, or I suppose more likely Jamison Gibson Park, will have to make way for James Lowe across this European season now?
Well, that's a very good argument, because he's such a strong finisher with the ball. I mean, he's just a knack of getting the ball down, and he's such a good athlete. He's a game changer in many ways that, you know, if Leinster are going to be in tight games, you'd expect at the back end of the season, whether it's the Pro 14 or Europe, You might only get one of those chances in a game, and who do you want the ball, the hands of Lowe, who's going to finish it out and maybe win the game for you. So there's that pressure to have him there because he just gets things done. And you can see guys around him as well, they expect him to make things happen, give him the ball and let him get over the game line. So there's a strong case for a trade-off against Vardy, who's very experienced, great campaigner, good line-out technician, very experienced guy around the field. But having said that, you still have really good options in the second row. So maybe a case that, they may have to go with Lowe at the end of the day, because even last weekend, despite Leinster's performance, it was Lowe really was the difference at the end of the day. I mean, he scored 2 tries and he was actually the creator of the penalty try. So, he had a hand in everything. So, yeah, they have to consider it. Unless they feel they're going to comfortably win without him, it'd be very foolish to go into a game and not have him there when you might need him most.
Yeah. Keith?
Yeah, I don't think Gibson Park gets a look in. I think Vardy he's too much of a big game player for Leinster, was consistently last year. James Lowe I feel he's very annoying to play against. I mean, he looks like, maybe it's all the hair, I'm not sure. Maybe it's the fact that I'm follically challenged, but he kind of rubs people up the wrong way, but he rubs me up the wrong way looking at him. He's got boundless energy and he's really, really effective. And I have to say, I think he is a game changer. He's a match winner. I would have both of those in the squad. He has become very different from Nasiwa, but he has become that go-to Southern Hemisphere guy in the back line that you can depend upon to do something special. So, I said it at the start, I thought he was fantastic at the weekend. Yeah.
Munster have a really tricky assignment at the weekend. They're obviously playing Exeter, who are joint top of the Premiership with Saracens. They're 6 from 6. So, you talked about maybe not being quite clinical enough, Eddie. Munster, 65% possession, 68% territory. They still scored 3 tries, we should say. Liam Tolan on the commentary on air was making the point that he was quite impressed with what they were doing in attack. He felt there was a variation to their play. So talk to us about Munster's attack, because they have been accused of being a touch predictable thus far in the season and last season as well. And what's their best midfield partnership as well, is a question they're going to have to decide on.
I wouldn't go along with the fact that they attacked really well. To me, I thought at times during their phase attack they looked a bit disorganised and a bit dishevelled. I think certainly when they get close to the line, they have this knack of getting across the line. But you think the source of their 3 tries were basically a line-out maul and 2 scrums. And they should have probably had a penalty try from the scrum, actually. They shouldn't have to go to a 3rd scrum, but it made no difference in the end, the fact, that Albion Matheson scored, but it shouldn't have come to that. But at no point we're seeing Munster, would say, win a set piece possession around the 10-metre line and then go through 10 or 15 or 20 phases and unpick a defence and score. It's usually a big moment. Someone runs over somebody and maybe from there. And even if they'd got the try from Keith Earls, it would have come from a turnover. They should have got that try. But I thought Joey Carver spent a lot of time on Saturday going into contact himself or cleaning out rucks. Carver carried 11 times, which... He's your main playmaker. Now, if your main playmaker runs with the ball, there's got to be something really good come out of it, like a line break or an offload. But if he's running into contact and he's at the bottom of a ruck, or he's cleaning out rucks, which makes it even look worse, you just wonder what he's at like. And I thought that struck me on Saturday about Munster, is they're playing with the ball a lot. Don't get me wrong, they're happy to play with the ball, but they're not actually making inroads unless they're physically dominating people. And that's their MO as well. But I think the problem for them going into next week at Sandy Park is they will find it very hard to physically dominate Exeter Chiefs. They're one of the more physical teams in Europe. And they play a very attritional game. So it's kind of like taking Exeter on their own game, and that could be a problem. And that's what would worry me about it. The midfield partnership, well, I think they'll probably go with Dan Goggin and Sammy Arnold. But I don't know. I probably think that there's room for a shake-up there. I think that's a fairly direct midfield, and if they're going to mix it up a little bit, they may have to look like a Rory Scannell going into the midfield. And I think Scannell could do well as well at 13. He's never been tried there, but I think he's very good. I think he's actually a more natural footballer. But that'll be just my take on it. And I'm not as close as Johan van Gran. He sees them every day, but that's just my gut on it. But I think Scannell is a catalyst for them, and I'd like to see him in there. But the talk seems to be at the moment that they're going to stick with that midfield combination, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But I certainly think if Scannell goes in, I actually like to see him out at 13 outside Goggin, because he's more creative, and they'll have to be creative if they're going to break down Exeter Chiefs. They're not going to run over them. I think I don't see that happening. I could be proven wrong next weekend, but I wouldn't be the road I'd travel trying to beat Exeter.
When you use the word disorganised there, Eddie, about their attacking shape, what kind of things are you seeing?
Well, disorganised is a harsh word, but so I've said it so. But the point is, I think your main playmaker is Joey Carberry. He's the guy that's going to unpick the lock to get you through the door. So you want to get the ball in his hands. You want to let him go to the line, and you want to. And we know what he does well. He goes to the line. He beats people, or he offloads to people who go through a gap, or he gets his hands free. I thought on Saturday there was times where he wasn't sure where he was going. He was running into traffic. He was in contact. And then the alarm bell for me is, why is he cleaning out rucks? Why does if you're running a system, an attacking system, you want to keep your key playmaker on his feet and at first receiver as much as possible. And if he's cleaning out rucks, he's not going to be a first receiver. And it's not like there's an evident system that Joey Carr was expected to clean out rucks, and then like there's another first receiver pops up automatically to take his place. So I just thought that they're not really running on I suppose, fluidly in their phase attack. They're playing hard. Now, it's a difference. I'm not saying they're not playing hard. They're playing hard, but they're not actually, I think, deconstructing defences with smart players. And Carberry is the guy who can do that. We know he can do that. But if he's cleaning out rucks and stuff, I think that's where he's been wasted. So that was the thing that struck me during the game. And if you go back to it, as I said at the start, their source of their tries were, two scrums in a line-out. They didn't really pick Leinster apart at any point when they had the ball.
Yeah, fair point. Keith, that jump out at you?
Not to the same degree, or maybe it did jump out, but I think there's a different reason in the midst of this. I watched Leinster play for the last number of weeks, and their ability to suddenly dial up their line speed with Josh van der Fleer in particular has proved to be incredibly potent in their defensive line. So I'm not so certain that there's as much space. In the last 10 or 15 minutes of the game, I think Carberry got caught in a chunk of different rucks and stuff. I just think the ball slowed down when Matthewson went off. And I also think it takes a period of time for a new out half to get into a team and to start seeing it. For me, I actually think Munster are handling the ball better than they were last season. It looks a little bit more slick. They need to have more people to have a cutting edge in it, and with that I don't have any doubt whatsoever. I don't think we can have a situation where everything is based around the fact that Johnny Carberry is a good 10 and he's going to unlock everybody. Yeah. There needs to be more going on. I think there were opportunities, and when those opportunities don't happen, and when mistakes, defensive mistakes happen as well, and an opposition gets a score against you, it becomes very tough. So I wouldn't hold them up to that full level of scrutiny just yet, because I think as a new backline, it's fairly raw. They haven't played a huge amount of rugby together. So I would have been happy with their skill level, happy with their energy level. I think a lot of teams are going to find it hard to unlock the defence of Leinster. And if I go back, and I know it was a fairly young team the previous week, but pretty much a lot of that backline was able to demolish through an Ulster backline. So it's I just don't think you can build it all on the back of one performance, which I know Eddie isn't. But on the nature of last week, I would still say that Munster made a progression. They played very well. They weren't as clinical as they'd want to be, and that needs to improve. Okay. Exeter are the most awkward group to play against. They're an incredibly well-organised team. They know how to play at home. They have a really good, well-built-up support structure in their whole club. It's how they're set up as a very local club. They're an incredible success story, and they're the only ones that made money in England last year as a rugby club. That's very, very hard for a club that hasn't been there for an awful long time. They're still new boys in the whole situation. they deliver week in, week out. You know, they're a very competitive team. It's going to be very tough for Munster away from home.
Okay. As well as being on the radio, we're streaming here live on Facebook and YouTube, so you can get your Heineken star comments into Keith and Eddie. Best comments win prizes. This week we'll be giving away a pair of tickets to see Munster Gloucester in round 2 of the Champions Cup at Thomond Park. So I'll get to some of those questions later on in the chat. Anyone want to talk too much about referees, because ultimately there's so much more interesting things going on, but it's come up at several points now. A few different decisions. So Ben Whitehouse, the referee, is generally quite highly regarded, and it seems like he's been fast-tracked for big things. If we take the Earls' runaway try, Eddie, I think you said you thought that should be a try, no question. So this was the Arnold tackle on Henshaw, breaks to Earls, he runs away. What was interesting about this was, I'm not sure which touch judge, it was either Dan Jones or Mike English, but one of them stepped in fairly early and fairly adamantly to say it had been a knock-on, no try, and TMO wasn't really used. And that seemed a bit premature on behalf of whichever touch judge stepped in. So maybe a degree of sympathy for Ben Whitehouse there?
Well, it's bad game management by Whitehouse, very simply, because once that incident happened, everybody suspected at that moment that could have been knocked on. There's nothing wrong with suspecting a knock on there. It looked like it might have been knocked on by Arnold. But to stop the game and then automatically give a penalty to me made no sense. He should have let Earls finish. Try scored, then go back and check.
Yeah.
And then he would have seen it wasn't a knock on and he would have awarded the try. But he blew the whistle instantaneously at the behest of the assistant referee. By the way, the assistant referees are assistants, and the referees have been told to take their advice under guidance. You know, you don't have to do what he says. But once he blew the whistle, now that was it. He didn't go to the TMO because he couldn't go to the TMO. But what's he do? He goes to TMO. TMO says, "Oh, there's no knock on there." What's he doing? Give Earls the ball back and tell him, "Oh, away with you," and see how you get on. You can't do it. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's bad game management.
Yeah.
And he should have had the experience not to blow the whistle, let Earls finish, and then go back. And then if it's a knock-on, it's a knock-on.
There's a certain...
But it wasn't a knock-on, it was a try, and that changed the game. It was Munster back in the game with a bang. At the start of the second half, exactly what they needed. And instead, it's a penalty, Leinster put it in the corner, low scores, game over. Thanks to the use of the hall.
Is there an element, Keith, I wonder, of grandstanding and showing everybody I don't need to go to the TMO, I'm strong enough to make a decision with my own eyes kind of thing, or take my, as a team, okay, it's either Dan Jones or Mike English steps in, but is there an element of I think there was an edict recently saying we don't need to go to TMO for everything. Yeah. I think there was a bit of that going on potentially.
Well, look, if we just go to the whole TMO part, there could be an element of that. I love it when a referee makes a decision and a player on the field will listen to the referee. And when the TMO, when it's shown and the referee said, I'll make the call. I hate listening to the guy sitting in a truck somewhere say, no, I think you need to look at it this way. I don't know if I'd agree with your interpretation on that. Now, they never say it in that fashion, but you can pick it up in the tone. I know, maybe not. The referee refs it. It's very hard to really take the view of somebody that isn't actually in the white hot of the game. So if the referee said, no, in my feeling, that's what it was. There was also, even from that bang from Arnold, it did, whether Earls was ahead of him, whether if he had caught that, whether it would have been a try. So there's kind of swings and roundabouts in that. It's consistency. It's the fact that you wait for a period of time to go back and make the decision. It's correct in that 5 yards that it's most definitely a knock-on and then be proven to be wrong means somebody is trigger happy with it. You just need to get a bit of a balance. I think we need to wind in the TMO anyway. I think it's used too often, too broad a brief on it. I think it fractures the game a lot, and I think it makes it very tough. It comes down to, like, when you go back and say, he is a foot in front of your man. You say, God, that's a bit hard. It's the game goes at 100 miles an hour. It doesn't go at stop by frame by frame.
Yeah,
that's fine for foul play. It's fine for putting your foot into touch. It's fine for having a blatant knock on. But if you have to look at it 20 times, I think you have to start saying, well, we're going to go and give the benefit of the doubt because it's entertainment.
Yeah.
Not this kind of half stuff. So, like, when I go back to Keith Earls at the very start and the tackle at the start, in real time, it kind of looked okay. No, I'm not disagreeing with it. I think it was a penalty. He was tackled without the ball. No, it's whether he's holding the ball or whether he's touching the ball, but that's part of it for James Lowe. But it was a timing factor. And once he was tackled without the ball, it absolutely was a yellow card. And it absolutely was a penalty try.
Funny, Earls is speaking today. He says, I'd agree it was probably a yellow, but not a penalty try. I don't think so. Because whether I was going to hold him up or the ball was going away from him, he was reaching. So Earls wasn't so sure he was going to get the ball, but he says that's the decision the referee made. Eddie, you were trying to get back in there?
Yeah, I think that there was someone mentioned about Earls being offside. Well, it's open play, so there's no offside line. So he couldn't have been offside. So, like,
but if he knocks the ball, if he's standing forward, even in open play, if the ball is knocked from one player to another player and he's in front of him, he is offside.
No, I disagree. If Robbie Henshaw loses the ball in contact and it goes backwards, there's no offside line in a tackle. It's not.
Did it go off Arnold? Did it go off his head?
We don't know. It went off his head. We didn't see. But the ball went back from Robbie Henshaw. It was dislodged in the tackle. Robbie Henshaw had possession of the ball and then he lost it. And Earlsy picked it up. I think that's a play-on scenario. Now, that's just my interpretation. But my point is, as we go back over, I don't think he needs a blood-up whistle when he did.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, because Keith, we'd agree, Keith, with your point about the TMO being used too often, and it's talk about stop-start and really ruining the flow of an occasion. But in that instance, where you're talking about an extra 5 seconds for Keith Earls to finish his run and put the ball down, and then you get the benefit of a TMO, and it's such a crucial decision. I mean, that was surely not an area where it was overuse of the TMO. I mean, you're mad not to use it in that instance.
No, but I do think you have to you have to define it a little bit more. It seems to be used all the time and the referee isn't making a decision.
Yeah, but in this instance, for the sake of 5 seconds, for the sake of the 5 seconds, to let Keith Earls finish his little sprint, and then you get to, it's such a crucial moment in the match, scoreboard's very, in the balance, that's a moment where you, 3-4 seconds, let him finish his run, touch it down, and then for this crucial decision, we get the benefit of the TMO. In that instance, it seemed like excessive use of kind of, I don't know, I'm going to trust my own judgment here.
Oh, yeah, well, sure, I'd love to agree with you 100% if it benefited Munster in a try, of course, yes.
I know, but I'm not talking about Munster or anyone, like if it was Leinster.
And I'm not either, I'm being facetious, yeah. But I do think that there is, it needs to be defined a little bit more. It needs to be restricted a little bit. And get on with it. The referee and say, oh, got that one wrong, fair enough, move on. It's harder when you're watching on television and everybody else is making their view and saying, God, there's blatant things we missed left, right and centre. But it's too many of the games are being brought down to tiny little things on frame by frame. And do you know what? By the letter of the law, when you look at it frame by frame, they're correct. But in the real pace of the game, I think something is lost in it.
We mentioned the Earls yellow card and the penalty try. He's not so sure that was a penalty try. And then you both mentioned, or certainly you did, Eddie, the 3 scrums, the Matheson try. And even Liam Tolan on the TV was saying why, because I think at one stage the referee had called in some of the Leinster players and said if there's another one, if there's a fourth one, then we're going to have a penalty try. And Liam Tolan was slightly outraged in commentary. I
think Tolley's right on that one, because what if Albion Matheson drops the ball down over the line to Scrum to Leinster and they get out of jail? Munster shouldn't have had to actually play that ball. It should have been a penalty try on the second scrum, I think. I mean, two scrum penalties. If the referee is sure that Leinster have infringed to prevent Munster from advancing the ball under their post to the scrum, it's a penalty try. Like that's what the general interpretation is, and I think he kind of bottled it there. He should have given the penalty try, and I don't think anyone could have complained. The third penalty, like Albion Matheson had to score. What if he lost the ball or something? What happens then? You just play on or something. But I just think that's kind of walking out of it. They're big decisions, so some referees, let's have another scrum and see what happens.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that annoys me about the scrum is the referees telling scrum halves to use the ball at a scrum. Like, since when do referees get to make tactical decisions for teams? Like, if we're dominating the scrum and they're going backwards and my number 8 wants to keep his ball at his feet, who's the referee to say, come on, use it?
Yeah.
Like, that's bad. Like, I get the maul thing because you've got 2 drives, and if it stops the second time, then you have to use it. That's the law. But I don't know anyone in the law where there's a referee can make a tactical decision for a team by forcing them to use a scrum possession.
Yeah. You mentioned Mathewson, by the way. It looks like he's out for the weekend, and that's a big loss. Duncan Williams came on late on in that game. And then one for you, actually, Keith. I presume this is as old as time, this kind of trick, but one of my colleagues here, Neil Tracy, spotted it. He tweeted a picture of the scrum, and Peter O'Mahony was basically, when he was binding, he was going under Archer's leg. He was coming around the side. He was going under Archer's leg as opposed to over Klein's back, in effect, meaning they essentially had a third lock in there. I presume, is that a trick that's as old as time?
Well, I have to try and figure out in my own head whether that's wrong, whether you're not allowed to do that or
right.
not.
So he might be allowed to do that.
Do you know whether you can bind? Because there are different binding structures. There always were. Argentina used bind entirely differently in the front row, entirely differently. And whether it's just a matter of preference or whatever, I don't know whether that's an illegal bind or not, actually. So right. I know that I knew it was mentioned. Of course, I should have checked up on it before I came on, but I didn't.
Sure, look, you're in there. You're not looking behind you. You don't know who's grabbing you where. You're just pushing.
I wouldn't care. I'd be happy out.
Do you know, Eddie?
Yeah, I suspect that, and I don't know this for sure in the law in front of me, but I suspect the crotch binding for the flankers is illegal. It's certainly illegal on the hooker, but I don't know is it strictly illegal. But I know it's not encouraged because it puts extra pressure on the profs. But you can see why they do it. But I could be wrong on that. But I don't know exactly if it's because that law has been moved around a bit as well. And as Woody says, the Argentinians used the Bajada technique, which is completely different altogether. They used to crotch bind on everybody, and except they just gave it up because of the engagement law. Yeah. So I think it's something that you do now and again in a game, right? And you've got to it gives you extra power. There's no question about it. But I think under the law, I'd be surprised that's not a penalty. Right, okay. I do know that you're supposed to bind across. And you see 99 times out of 100 guys doing that. But we've used it at times, but you wouldn't use it all the time because I think there's a risk you get penalised. Okay.
A word on these two for the Champions Cup opening round then before we talk Connacht Ulster. So we mentioned Sandy Park and how difficult that is, Keith. And then Leinster kicked things off on Friday night at the RDS against Wasps, which will just be good fun. Wasps had plenty of pace and their free scoring. They also concede a lot. 153 points conceded in their first 6 Premiership matches this season. They've won 4 out of 6, so that'll be fun if nothing else.
Absolutely, and if we're talking about what the Pro 14 is like, September is September everywhere, and lots of teams are figuring out where they are. Wasps have an ability to be at the important part in the quarterfinals, semi-finals, in the top 4 at the end of every competition that they play, and they will try stuff. They have a bit of fun. I still think it's interesting that they play the most flash style of rugby with Big Ted at as their coach, with Dai Young, and who was not the most fleet of foot prop forward. I toured with them a long time ago, but it's that's going to be really exciting. I still can't see past Leinster this year. Of course they can have a bad day, but in the pool stages, I think they'll do very, very well. They have an ability to constrict oppositions. So of course Wasps could score from breakaway, but from pure focused play, they're going to be under pressure to break down Leinster. And the manner in which Leinster are actually defending, and that's one of the points I wanted to make on Joey Carberry. The manner in which Leinster throw in an extra player and wrestle for the ball, even as they make the tackle, requires you to put another person in. And at times you need an extra player to get in that early, otherwise it's slowed down too much. Slightly counterintuitive to have your playmaker in there, but I do think that's one of the reasons behind it. Right. But I'm looking forward to that game.
And Sandy Park, briefly?
Sandy Park, I think Munster they've played well over the last couple of weekends, and I think a lot depends on 9 and 10 and seeing how they're going and their game management, and to see what happens with the injuries in the next couple of days to see who gets picked. I'm hoping Mathewson is actually okay, but I know he's getting a scan today. I don't know if he's officially out or not. Right. But I think it's a tough one for them to go there. I would be hoping that they'd go and get a losing bonus point at worst.
Okay. Losing bonus point acceptable for Munster, Eddie?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, especially against a team of Exeter's calibre, yeah. Look, like many Munster teams before them have gone away and taken a bonus point, and it was the difference in getting out of the pool at the end of the day, and that goes back into the days when Munster would have been in the running to win the tournament. So, yeah, it'll be a tough challenge, though. I think if they are going to do it, they're going to have to get some tempo into their attack, and a bit of accuracy, as Woody said. Like, that's going to be key. I don't think they're going to be able to run over Exeter, but we'll see. But I know Exeter are a team that, in their own mind, I think, are quietly thinking about Europe as well, because they've climbed the Premiership mountain already, you know.
Yeah, okay. Connacht then, 58 years without a win in Belfast, and they won by 7 at the weekend. So, I mean, fantastic for them. Andy Friend was talking about how brilliant the pack was, and that was the real foundation of the whole thing. And Dan McFarland, I mean, we didn't even get a chance to talk about Munster discipline. Van Gran very upset with Munster discipline, and Stephen Archer blocking McFadden and all that stuff. But McFarland very disappointed with Ulster's discipline as well. In the whole of last year's campaign, Ulster picked up 7 points in this disciplinary system where it's 3 points a red and 1 for a yellow or a siding commissioner warning. They've already in 6 games totalled 7 points, so they've equalled last year's tally, and they've been a full 80 minutes across these opening 6 games where they haven't had 15 men on the field. So that's certainly an area for them, but it's a fantastic win for Connacht, Keith.
It's a great win. Done very well, played at a very high tempo, some fantastic scores with it. Benefited definitely from the red card, which I would have sympathy for that red card, but I don't know what we're going to have to do with those levels of contact where you have your eye on the ball and you're trying to do the right thing, yet you collide with somebody in the air. You just need to be more aware than before of exactly what's going on. You have to have your eye on the ball, but you have to have some level of peripheral vision, because if you hit a guy that's in the air, it was always going to be a red. There was no real argument with it. I just thought some of the scores were fantastic. But it was that, look, we talked about it a little bit like last week, where that joy seemed to be back in there, where that cutting edge, that really like cracking running lines, break, all the things that Eddie was saying that maybe Munster are not doing as well at the moment, which is breaking the line. Connacht seemed to be able to do that with the greatest of comfort. And still, the game required the TMO to come in twice for 2 tries that Ulster scored, and that would have been a big shake-up within it.
Yeah, I should mention, by the way, Connacht fans will have Willie Ruan on the show tomorrow talking about the new plans for the sports ground, €30 million redevelopment, a 12,000-seater stadium, which is very exciting for them. Ulster, Eddie, have Leicester kicking off the Champions Cup with on Saturday 5:30. Well, like, they're such a yo-yo team last year, Ulster. I mean, not even just from game to game, but actually, 15-minute chunks within games. They were like Jekyll and Hyde. How are they shaping up for Champions Cup and the season beyond this year?
Well, I think their biggest problem at the moment, more than anything, is their injury list. I mean, you saw the carnage that ensued in Thomond Park last week when Munster got them. And they got some guys back on deck. They got Stuart McCluskey, Jacob Stockdale, Rory Bess, Nasser Coetzee, Sean Reedy, and Ian Henderson and John Cooney reappeared again after everyone was worried they wouldn't make it. And that makes a difference. But they're still without Henry Spate, Louis Luddick, Luke Marshall, Rob Herring, Kyle McCall, Ian Hurst, Jordy Murphy, Chris Henry, Marty Moore. And the big problem is in their front row. Like, the front row they had out the other night was very, very inexperienced. And like, they're going to, if they can get guys back on the field, and I don't know what the update is on these guys, I think they have a chance. And the fact that they've had a bit of luck at the start of the season, where they won a few games in the last minute, kind of got the wind in their sails, there's a good feeling up there. Certainly a million miles from where they were last year. But they do need a bit of luck. I mean, again, if you were Dan McFarland last Friday night, you're pitching up, missing some key players against a Connacht team that really fancy it, and then Coetzee gives away a silly penalty just come to half time, and then a minute after it, Matthew Ray gets a red card, and they're playing with 13 men for 10 minutes of the second half. Like, how unlucky can you get, So I think they feel that if they can get everybody on deck, they're winning a shout. But I think without getting some of those guys back, they will struggle in the white heat of European rugby. And they might get a job done at home, but I think heading to Racing the following week could be a whole new world for them if they don't get these guys on deck.
Yeah, okay. Lads, we'll have to leave it there. Busy week coming up. Eddie, thanks a million. Keith, thanks very much.
Brilliant. Cheers, boys.
Cheers. Keith
Cheers,
Wood
Claude.
and Eddie O'Sullivan there on Monday Night Rugby, with thanks to Air Sport, home of rugby in Ireland.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Air Sport. Watch live Pro 14 action on Air Sport this season. Visit airsport.ie.